Hello, everybody. My name is Sylvain Rochon, and I am still writing my book. I'm still in the section talking about the economy. And I was kind of dreading writing this chapter because there's a lot of numbers. I want to make sure it makes kind of sense. But it's very important. It's one of the core chapters in the economy section, since it describes a little bit what many would call an upside down or even maybe irrational way of designing an economy. And I'll explain to you why that is. Is that currently we are in an economy that originates really from land ownership, from kings and queens, people in power, people that have the land, that own everything, and people are renting space on top of the land and working the land in exchange for protection and things like that. And we've evolved as a community, and that even the kingdom concept that is structured this way came from thinking that even precedes that, where the land was for everybody. Now, there's a point in time in the history where the most powerful people, the tribe leader or the king or whoever at the time, they had all the strength. They decided, well, staking my flag, I own it because and you are my servants inside it, instead of let's share it. Not every society has actually gone that way. If you think of the Native Indians, the Aboriginals in North America, in most communities, they still, until the Europeans came by, they still have the concept of the land being not owned by anybody, but a shared land, also with the animals and so on. So it's not an unusual idea. But what I'm doing here is, since the priority in the new ideal society is so that everybody has what their needs, their basic needs, right? And the fundamental way to actually wrap our heads and make this work, I thought, was to bring back those ancient ideas that were very social, very communal, that they were right. They were the right decision, where the land belongs to everybody. And in that respect, that's how the economy, in my view, and I've written about this and I talked about this in other previous chapters, but I'm going to describe how it can actually work financially with actual money, dollar values associated to it. So we'd have to kind of flip things around, and if we want to transition to something like this, to telling everybody, including the crown corporations, including individuals, saying, hey, the land doesn't belong to you. It's not yours. You're not owner. Nobody owns the land. It's a collective ownership. But you can, like, everybody benefits from the land rental, because land is used for business purposes, for personal purposes, by individuals all over the place, for farming, all this stuff. So we can create a cash flow from this that is different from ownership and renting, but made in such a way that nobody actually owns the land. No entity has a complete control over the land. So, and this is rehashing something I told you before as I write the book. The land, it needs to be rented. It belongs to the people as a collective. The government is there only for regulation purposes and to facilitate. Now, the Ministry of Economy and Trade, that would have part of its mandate would be to create the regulations. And when you're renting a land from the people, because now we're renting not from an individual that has certain ideas of what the deal could be like. Now we're renting from a people, so the whole nation essentially is involved, represented in practicality with the experts in the Ministry of Economy and Trade to expertly kind of take decisions, the best decisions possible for the people on how to manage these. We are renting the land for our purposes because we're the owners. We're the ones that want the lands to be used appropriately. So a person, like the people of on the East Coast, have a say on how the lands are used on the West Coast, and to a degree, of course. It could all be structured in such a way that, through regulation, again, that land also that is being used in a certain area, people in that area has a higher say about how this land can be used because they live near it. Is that going to be a mine? Is that going to be like a nuclear plant? Is that going to be like for solar power generation, for housing? Everybody's got a say, but the people in the certain locality as a collective would probably have a weighted vote on it through the online system I've been talking about since forever, that's monitored by AI, where AI is helping parsing the data and to provide ministries with the correct information and feedback on the needs and desires of the people of different lands and so on and so forth. So we could have all this system kind of set up. And so the rental of the land would be paid by the people that are renting. So, for example, I myself using the land in a certain way, but I also own part of as a collective, the whole of the nation's land. So I'm feeding with my money, I'm feeding some money into the rental of the land for the purpose that I state, and I have a rental contract or a lease contract with the nation, the people of the nation, to use it responsibly under certain terms that the people agree on. Now, so I'm paying a certain amount of dollars a month for that, but I am receiving also part of the income of that land from the government as well. Now, here's how this could work. Now, again, we're trying to cover all the bases, right? And we're trying to create an economy that has a strong cash flow, because cash flow is great to allow opportunities, offer and demand. The more cash flow there is, the more trade there is, and trade is good. Trade is the exchange of commodities and services, and we want to keep that, even though there's a lot of automation possibilities. So I did a bit of math. I used Canada as a model. I did a lot of math, actually. And I figured out that using statistics from all over the place, agricultural lands and a bunch of assumptions, in Canada, there's about 600,000 square kilometers, sorry for you guys in America, square kilometers of land that is currently used. So cities, countryside, whatever. And I couldn't find the exact information like to the square kilometer, but it should be in that range. Again, the idea is not to recommend something specific as a new budget, because there's too many differences. It's really to show how it could work and be realistic. Okay, so 600,000 square kilometers. Now that turns out to be approximately 150 million acres, maybe a better measurement method or metric, okay? And land is rented currently. There's currently land rental market, especially in agriculture. So I use those numbers to approximate an average land rental value of perhaps $200 an acre. And so that's kind of gives a sense, again, and it could be very different because people don't really rent land in the cities generally. So I couldn't find a very valuable number. There's a wide range depending on where the land is. And of course, inside cities is more, and anyway, it gets complicated. So I just fixed that value to $200 based on a bunch of sources. And I'm going to leave it at that for now, as an average. Okay, like land can be $40, and some of it can be $400 an acre, and in cities it can be even more than that, and so on. So if you use that average on the total amount of acres that is being used, because every piece of land that's being used needs to be rented now. That's the assumption. Then we end up at a $360 billion in Canadian dollars for annual rental, if you count, of course, 12 months out of the year and so on. Now that's a lot of money, $360 billion Canadian. That would be income that that replaces land tax. Okay, so part of it is that, so nobody's buying land anymore; it just rents it. So there's no economy around buying land anymore, and there's no land tax available. But that's significant for Canada. That's a significant income. It's about half, where I think half the more than half the annual income of the whole nation at all levels of the government. Just on land rental, but that is the revenues of the people, because the people own the land. The government is just there to manage and redistribute that amount in a fair way to the people, again, to create cash flow. And how do we do that? Well, remember I mentioned the concept of basic income. Well, that's money that comes to us to buy our basic needs, and we can spend the money in any way we want, but we need to spend for food, for lodging, because that's, again, the priority. So we're getting income, a certain amount, or a big amount, from the land that's rented. If you're a big tycoon and you need a lot of land for all your businesses, then you're renting a lot of land, and that money goes to the people. Okay, so that's paying a lot of people's basic needs. And they're using the land according to rules that the people of the nation agreed upon. So that creates a lot of balance. But more on that in the next chapter, when I talk about equality and how it kind of balances a lot of inequalities, economic equalities in the nation. Okay, so now to do the math properly, we need to talk about the poverty line, because that's our income. So we have a revenue from nation. It needs to be redistributed. The right amount to redistribute to people is the poverty line. At least that's a minimum. As a basic income, that would be unconditional in this case, because most of it is supposed to be revenues anyway, right? It's supposed to be revenues from the land that we own as a collective. And in Canada, the poverty line is about $22,000 Canadian. In the US, I know it's 19,000, but that's because of exchange rate and differences in cost of living and so on. So that's about $1,800 a month, each adult. I recommend that this amount be the same amount whether the adults are living together, or if it's a child. If it's a child, of course, the money would go to the legal guardian of that child. And in most basic income experiments and thinking does not consider children to be viable to receive that amount, because they don't have as many expenditures. But I differ in that opinion. Well, actually, I agree that children cost less than adults in some ways. But also remember what I talked about, the parenting being a viable and critical value add to society. Well, part of that amount for each child that goes to the guardian goes to pay the guardian. So you're paying the child's expenses, but also it goes to the bank account of the guardian anyway. And so the excess that is not meant to pay for the basic income of the child is an added value amount from society, from the nation, from the people, as a thank you for raising these children. So it kind of balances that out. So I figured if we can make it as simple as possible, let's make the amount the same for every individual. We're just sending it, if you're not 18 yet, we're sending it to your guardian. Makes it very easy to administer. Also, the reason why I'm combining, instead of reducing the amount of basic income per household, one, yes, making it simple, but also it's beneficial for the environment to do this, because that would encourage more people to live together as collective, couples, families, because you're not penalized in any way. If you live together, you receive the same amount of basic income anyway. So that would be an incentive. There would be more incentive for people to live together, to get more, like the right amount of basic income, versus the other models where people may want to live apart to optimize their income and so on and so forth. So in different ways. So you want to encourage people kind of staying together and making more money together, and then they have more money to spend for whatever they need if they are together, because the cost of living are a bit lower that way. So that's in a gist. That's how it works. Now, the whole cost of if you pay $1,800 a month for every Canadian, that's 35 million Canadians. That amounts to $770 billion a year, like more than twice of the income from the land. So you still need to actually pay for the basic income, the other half of the basic income, through different ways. So, and that's okay. So I did a bunch of math. You can read the blog. It's listed in down below in the description to get most of the math and the assumptions. But generally speaking, what I'm doing, because the Canadian economy, between the Canadian government expenditures are divided between the provinces. The government is sending some money to pay for certain things with the provinces and so on and so forth. It gets really complicated, but in a nutshell, I've adjusted the amount to account for reduction of ministries. So because a lot of it is automated, and I was very generous. I only did a reduction of about 10%, and that 10% would go to help pay basic income because we're automating, and we're not reducing the amount spent for healthcare or education. We're expanding on that, even though there would be automation to reduce some of that, because in Canada that's mostly taken care of by the provinces. So I did assumptions to do that just to keep numbers and the math fairly simple, because again, we're just trying to see if it can work out, right? People much smarter than I am in economy can rework these systems and figure out the details if you have all the information available to you. Now, so we're expanding on healthcare and education, making it's already free in Canada, healthcare, but certain things are not, so we get to pay for that. Higher education, like a college and a university, is subsidized somewhat. Well, somewhat. Now we're making it free, basically, right? So college, university, everything you want, it's all free and paid for from revenues from the people and the land, and also the work they will be putting in, and their taxes, which is mostly personal income tax. At least 49% of income from the government, it comes from personal income tax, not from corporations. So we can play on that as well. And I did do some math. So because of all this math, there's another $221 billion that that come from the federal that already is there to pay for different services, like as expenditures, transfers to persons, and whatnot. So we're shifting a bunch of that to the basic income. That's the $221 billion that I've mentioned, and then so that almost covers it. That's 700 and no, that's 500 and some. Okay, it's 360 plus 221. And then we're adding to that some other expenditures off of programs that we are shifting, welfare, EI, and different things. We're shifting because we're replacing that. So those expenditures are now shifted. So I did approximations for that. Now we're almost up to, we're at 751, I think. So we're almost at the amount we need. And then we're just like I just explained, we can adjust income taxes to make it fairer, and also without removing anything from anyone. So according to studies, just to blanket this in some way, a revenue of $75,000 equivalent or more, doesn't matter what cost of living, city, rural areas, or whatever it is in North America, actually optimizes emotional well-being. That's one of the two things that are most important to people according to studies: emotional well-being, and the other aspect is, geez, I'm trying to get the right words here. Life, man. Sorry about this. Anyway, long-term goals. Okay, I'm just going to paraphrase. Long-term goals. So there's a certain amount, like $75,000, that is, if you go beyond that as far as personal salary, you don't feel more emotional gain from it. And part of it is because certain things the economy is generally organized for the middle class. It's not organized for the super rich. It's not organized for the poor either. So at a certain point in time where you just kind of cap out on things, you have everything you need. You don't really need any more expensive cars, for example. Once you already have a car, it doesn't really help in your well-being. It may help in achieving your long-term goals, seeing that you can buy more expensive things. And actually, this study does show that. So the feeling of accomplishment in your life is increased with more money, but your well-being is not beyond the 75K. So as far as taxation system, what I recommend is that we have the same flat tax rate up until you have $75,000 in revenues. So you have $22,000 in basic income already. So that equals to a salary, an annual income based on work of $53,000. That's your optimal. That's when you hit well-being status, like an optimal well-being. After that, it's all gravy. It's all attributed to your goals in life. Now, the money is really more of a measurement of success and achievement than actual way of you feeling good with yourself and for yourself, like the well-being aspect of things. So we have to keep low taxes up until the $75,000 mark, or a salary of $53,000. And in Ontario, the current number is about 20%. That's the low bar. Up until I think it's 48,000, so it's pretty close. 48,000 in the actual working revenues. $22,000 is not taxable. It's just tacked on because it's UBI. So I just kind of model, and I added a 5% to that. So under the new ideal model, to make it 25%. And the reason for that is that we're adding more value, like more healthcare, more education, like past the automation aspect, and you have the UBI service and all this stuff. So we're adding a token 5% because these are services for a lot of people that are added on. So you need to pay for it. And just like in Denmark, where they have a 45% income tax rate, and I believe that's across the board, what I've read, the people over there, 9 out of 10 people in Denmark don't complain at all about the 45%. Because they know exactly what they're getting out of it, and they're getting free education across the board, free healthcare, free everything. And social programs are hugely beneficial. They cover everybody, and so on and so forth. So they don't mind paying 45% if they know that everything's covered. But I think that's to apply that across the board is a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit unfair to me. I think people you need to help people get to that maximum wellness. On a low income, so if they want to stay in that range, especially you think of it, that we're also automating a whole bunch of stuff. So, I mean, there's probably people that don't want to work as hard, and they want to work according to their passions. That may be things that are a little bit less value, but important to them for their own well-being and transformation. You don't want to penalize these people that are in the lower end, even though it's significant for a personal salary to be at 53,000 plus 22, right? Or in that range. So I kept it there, but beyond that 75,000 total, I think we can increase taxes significantly, just like they did in Denmark. So you're taxing 25K for people that are within that range of that, trying to get to that cap well-being, and then after that you get that next tranche between $53,000 and $100,000 extra. You tax at 35, between 100 and 150, you tax at 50, and you start increasing that. If you're making more than $200,000, that tranche beyond that, you get taxed 80%. That's what I put down in the calculation. Again, this is all assumptions just to play around with. And the reason for that is like, well, and then research does show, like, you're okay with your well-being way before you reach your $200,000. It's really just play money. But with the UBI kicked in from the land and all this stuff and all this cash flow, it actually works out really, really nice, even for the people that are in the higher brackets. And I'll tell you how that works out. I did, again, some math based on my model. And if you look at somebody, so look at somebody that is, I took an example, somebody that's making $20,000 in salary. Right now, in the article, by that point, I'm using units because I'm assuming we're using a different kind of currency, like maybe a cryptocurrency on a blockchain. So we're not using, I'm just making a one-to-one equivalency between Canadian dollars and the units, or whatever, Bitcoin or whatever it is. So somebody that's working worth $20,000 a year, it receives $22,000 in UBI. So that's a total rough income, so gross income, sorry, not rough, of $42,000 a year. 22 from basic income, 20 of just by doing work. That's like minimum salary, right? So that's pretty low end, right? They're taxed at 25% bracket, so they pay $5,000 or units in taxes. That's their contribution to the basic income and services. So that's not a lot, right? That's not a lot. But remember, half of the UBI is actually taken from land rental, okay? Because we switched it around. The people own the land, and we rent it. So if you live, just to give an example of an individual, if you live in a small apartment because you want it to be affordable, that is, that's going to be maybe 1/10 of an acre. Well, your $200 a month average that I calculated per acre, your share is like $20. The rest of your expenditures on your apartment is varied. The landowner is paying a larger amount for the acre because he's the one with the contract with the people, and he has an agreement with the people and the nation that he's using the land for residences under certain terms and a due date and certain costs and so on and so forth. We're just like subleasing the apartments, and what we pay for rent, he covers his own land lease costs based on that, off of that, right? Anyway, going back to the example, so $5,000 in that goes to pay for basic income. So if you look at the current tax rate, which would be 20% in Ontario, Canada, it would be paying $4,000, right? But the actual income the person would be able to keep for himself is $16,000, which is really not much. That's below poverty line, according to Canada. Whereas with the UBI and the kind of switching the whole economy, you're actually netting $37,000 for the same salary, for the same effort. That's because of all the flips, of all putting priority on the person. Now, so that's hugely beneficial for the person that's working a lot less. Now, remember, this is not low salary necessarily because it's a lower end job, uneducated. Remember, there's a lot of automation going on in this model. A lot of things are automated, and the food chain is all automated, and it's really all gravy and luxury. People are working for different reasons. It's not substance. Okay, so this whole mindset also has to change. But so the person that has a lot of money. This is a majority of the population that has a lot of money to put back into the economy by spending. So they're spending, of course, for the basic needs. But if they don't work, they still have enough with the UBI, the $22,000, to make ends meet. If they choose not to work, or for whatever reason, they can still cover their own things and their basics. So they're not in the streets. If you look at the salaries for somebody that is at the higher rung, so I chose $180,000. So somebody that actually is working and his salary beyond the basic income is $180,000. That's a lot of money. Now, under the current system, because taxation does grade up. If you work at that level, you're starting having 40 some percent in taxes. And this is Ontario, depending on the tranches of salaries. You'd be paying almost $56,000 Canadian in taxes if you have that kind of salary without the UBI and under the current system. If okay. All right, but the same person would be paying over $74,000 under the ideal in units under the ideal economy. So about 50% more taxes being paid. It's significant. However, if you calculate the net income, including the UBI in the ideal case, they would actually be bringing home and have the same amount of usable money. But because the person is making $180,000 and is being taxed fairly heavily, that person is actually paying for almost for his own UBI, but paying for almost 3 other people that need the UBI on their own completely. So these individuals are heavy contributors to social wellness, to society, because they just happen to making a lot more money and doing great things for society. So they are accomplishing personal goals of giving to society and community by having that value, by adding that amount of value into society, into the community. So this individual that's able to achieve a lot has like a lot more money than he can spend, really. I mean, you're looking at your salary is 180 and you're bringing home 127,500, including the UBI. And like I said, it's not different from how a person would be paid at the same salary today. And you're still spending that money just like you would normally, but you're contributing a whole lot more to the wellness of others. So that's how I kind of planned it out. So that person, of course, has the emotional well-being because it's way above the $75,000, and he's in that range where he or she is contributing to society at a greater level by creating more value and contributing a lot more to society. Yet, as far as cash is concerned, has the same amount of cash as in the current economy to dispose of like they would normally. So the person is not sacrificing any dollars for himself. It's just being redistributed in a very different way to help others a lot more. So that's the system. And I'm hoping I didn't do any serious mistakes in the math. So if you want to look into the blog article and nitpick through it and send me comments, there's a lot of assumptions, like I said, in there, but it looks really good to me, at least as an example, as a broad stroke. And by the way, this new tax structure would add another $78 billion into the pool, like an additional $78 billion to the pool to pay for basic income. So all these numbers can be all fucked around and played around, and can be adapted to all sorts of budgets, in all sorts of countries, making the proper assumptions. And we can restructure the world and the world's nations so that, once again, the people are at the center, front and center. That's why we're doing everything that we're doing. We shouldn't be doing things strictly for ourselves and no one else. That is, in my mind, that's almost criminal. Although it is not. That's just in my mind. We should be working for each other and ourselves. We are communal people. We are in a global economy as well. It's not only inside the nation. We have to kind of think about everything, including the environment, because everything is connected to us. If we help each other, we only help ourselves. And that's how we should be thinking about things. So hopefully this has been interesting. I hope this hasn't been too long. Please feel free to read through the blog. This will eventually, after revisions later on, be part of my second book. So feel free to be critical and offer suggestions. I'm all open for that. And let's make this happen. Let's float some of these ideas, and maybe some of these will catch on and will become actual law or actual regulation to making our future a paradise. That's the goal. Ciao for now. I'll talk to you in about 2 weeks because I'm taking some time off during the summer. Bye-bye.